It's Thursday, June 27th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Bullied but not broken. Today on the show, we will talk about lifelong impacts of bullying and how it's evolved with social media. Here's a question for you. There's Pink Shirt Day, other anti-bullying campaigns around awareness and prevention, but are these things making a difference? Folks, bullying, not new. Name-calling, pushing, shoving, right? Social exclusion. For some kids and teens, it's an ongoing and debilitating problem. But what happens when those kids, right, from being kids to teenagers, they leave high school, they grow up? A lot of the time, the effects of bullying, well, sticks around. They stick around long after those classes are dismissed. So school's over now, right? We just did, we were at Holy Spirit last week. We did an end-of-the-year school food show. So we've talked about this. We've also talked about, university being out too. So in this season of school ending and summer break starting, the CBC's Sarah Antle spoke with a woman who was bullied as a child and a teen, and a decade later, still grappling with this. So Sarah joins me now in the studio. We also have Kelsey Clark, her mother Paula, and registered psychologist Dr. Janine Hubbard. And on the line, Kids Help Phone Senior Director Gail Brown. Gail, I'll say hi to you first, just because you're on the line and not in the studio with us. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show. Give us a national picture. When it's bullying and Kids Help Phone, let's just start with this national picture, and then we're going to zoom right in to Sarah's reporting.
Sure, of course. I mean, when we look at the stats that we have been collecting for some time, we're looking at about 3% of our calls and texts and contacts that revolve around bullying, okay? So when I say that number, it sounds like, oh, maybe it should be higher, but I think what we need to also look at are the calls and texts that we have around mental and emotional health and also relationship health. Because a lot of the bullying that's happening are sort of buried in those stats as well. And our, mental and emotional health is about half the calls that we take, and text and relationships about 20%. So it's a significant amount of the work that we do with young people in this country is around how we get along with each other, how we're treating each other, and what we can do to be healthier about that, because it is doing damage, and long-term damage, as you've said.
And last question before I'll go back to you later in the show, but how have things been evolving? Like, how long have you been doing this job for, by the way?
I've been doing it for quite a while. Well, the director job a few years, but I was on the front lines for many years. So I've been here since, I think, 1999.
Okay, so that's a year or two.
Yeah, a year or two. Since I left Newfoundland, actually. And it really, really has changed in terms of some things and not at all in terms of others. I think what's really changed is how and where the harassment and the mistreatment and the bullying is happening. Social media changed that landscape incredibly and has made it so much more damaging and so much more impactful for young people.
All right, Gail, thanks for this. We'll be checking back in. And also, your line's open. So if at any point you've, the spirit moves you to kind of say something, speak up. We're here.
Oh, sure.
All right. Okay. So that Gail Brown there, right? Kids Help Phone, Senior Director, has been with the Kids Help Phone since 1999. Let's go with Sarah Antle now. Tell me about this project and its start.
Yeah, so I was seeing a lot of bullying online. I was seeing a lot of instances of kids in this province being bullied, one where the RNC got involved, and I think it's time to have a conversation about this in a way that's not just ignore it, or don't let the bullies get you down, or it's Pink Shirt Day, let's talk about it. So I was seeing a lot of this, and I started reflecting on the media coverage and the conversations that I've heard both 10 years ago when I was in school and now, about bullying and the people who are experiencing it. And I realized that a lot of that rhetoric is just not that helpful. And it doesn't actually talk about the problem. It puts the onus of the problem on the person who is being bullied to ignore it rather than talking about the problem of why this is still an issue. So we have all these campaigns, and then at the center of the conversation, I found Kelsey Clark, and she is the perfect example of how this has a lifelong effect rather than just while you're in school, because while you're in school, the bullying happens, and then the bullying stops when you get out, but the effects of it don't.
So then you're working through this. You meet Kelsey, who's here. We're going to hear from now shortly, and her mom. As you're working through this, what's that like?
It was really emotional, and I expected it to be emotional, but I didn't at the beginning expect to talk to Kelsey's mom. So when she was thrown into the mix, it was even more emotional to have that perspective of the mother of somebody who's going through this. And when I was reflecting on these feelings, it particularly stood out to me that, Kelsey's mom still gets anxious when Kelsey doesn't talk to her.
Yeah.
If she's having a busy morning and she doesn't text her mom, then it's like, where is she? What's she doing? Is she okay? And it's 10 years after that, and Kelsey's an adult now, and she's married, and she has a job, and she has friends, and those feelings still stay for the mom too. So it's quite an emotional conversation. And Kelsey experienced different levels of bullying over like a span of almost or a little over 10 years, and now she's been out of it for 10 years, and it's still there. So those things, as Kelsey put it, take root in your mind.
And you also talk to experts around this, right? Now we've got one on the phone, but you spoke to others. We just heard about the kids' help phone side of it, but just talk to me a bit about from Professor Holfeld.
Yeah, he is located over on the West Coast. Yeah. He's over in Grenfell. He's a psychology prof over there, and he surveyed 900 kids in the province, which we have very little information about how kids experience bullying here, because it's really hard to do those surveys. And so he did this last year. He did 2 different surveys, and basically what he found is by grade 6, and he focuses on cyberbullying, by the way. By grade 6, 90% of kids have a smartphone in their hand pretty much the whole day.
90% of kids.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's from a fairly large sample size. And what he says is that by grades 7 and 8, or what kids used to experience in grades 7 and 8, kids are now experiencing in grades 4 to 6. So from all the research that he did, he really found that bullying is he can't say for sure if it's getting worse, if it's not, but what he can say is that it's changing because it's happening younger, and it's happening online, and it's happening all the time.
All right, thank you for framing that up. Right, that's context of where. For the rest of this discussion, we'll bring Kelsey into the mix. How you doing?
I'm good.
Okay, thanks for coming in here today. I know this is not, exactly what you think of for spending a lunch hour, but I appreciate you. Thank you so much for stopping in for this chat.
Happy to be here.
And at any point, if you're not comfortable talking at all, I can zip over to Janine and have a chat. Gosh, tell us. Let's go back to talk to us about your growing up experience.
So a lot of bullying started for me when I was in primary school.
Yeah.
I had one specific girl who sought me out. She would make fun of little things about me, and I'm a very emotional person. My grandmother always said I was soft-hearted, and I like to think of it that way. And I used to cry, and she just would seek me out for crying. And looking back now, I can tell I had a lot of anxiety when I was a young child, and this would cause me to just panic in school about little things, and then I would go into a full-blown panic attack, not knowing what it was, and then people would mock me for it. And then as I got older, it turned into my appearance, it turned into my weight, it turned into who I was friends with, and that if you were friends with me, you weren't cool, and then high school was a lot.
Yeah.
All my friends kind of ditched me at the very beginning, and we were going to a new school, so I had nobody. And it got really intense, and when I was in grade 10 is when social media really started taking off.
So what year was this? So was it like 2011, 2012?
2010, 2011 was grade 10, and there used to be a site called FormSpring where you could ask anonymous questions. And I used to get a lot of nasty messages through that. And it really stuck with me, and it took a lot to be comfortable with myself again, because you really take note of things people say. And it really made me feel like maybe I wasn't a nice person. Maybe I wasn't a beautiful person. Maybe I was fat. And it was a really hard time. And it just continued even after high school for some period of time. And continuing on into adulthood now, I still have nightmares about high school. I wake up in a cold sweat sometimes. And it's like the dreams aren't as vivid anymore, but I can tell like where I was too.
So I have a recurring dream that I have, which is just about something completely different, right? But it's me in university failing all my classes, right? This happens over and over and over again. I wake up in a panic, and then I realize, but you're getting this, and it's like a bullying scenario.
Yeah, it's like I'm back in high school all over again. Yeah. And I'm in the hallway, and they're just the same girls are just being mean and saying things to me. And then even though my husband, I didn't meet him till well after high school, he's seemingly there with me, and they're changing his opinion about me, and just like they did my friends at the time. And it causes me a lot of stress. I wake up and I'm anxious and upset. And
yeah, and you must have to rethink, like, wait, no, this is not that.
It's not real. I'm actually out of high school for like 10 plus years now. Like, I'm okay. But trying to get back in that mindset again, that like everything is okay, is kind of hard when I wake up from these dreams, and it sucks sometimes.
Yeah. It's really, well, I don't think I've said sucky before on the air, but it's really sucky if I had to use a word. Let's bring Mom into this. What was this like for you as a mom?
It was the hardest thing I ever went through.
Yeah.
I've had family members pass away. I've had sibling pass away. Nothing was as hard as what I went through with Kelsey. And I think, I've never asked her, but I'd be home and her computer would be left on. And the emails would be there, and I'd read them, and I'm like, oh, my God, who's doing this? Because she wasn't telling me, but I was the only friend she had. So I went through all of it with her. Her dad was away working, so it was me and her. And when I'd see it, it would kill me. It would crush me, because nobody should have the things said to them that she had. And not because it's my daughter. She's one of the most kind-hearted people you will ever meet. Everyone is the same. And I think that may have been one of the reasons why it started. She was so kind. And some people...
soft-hearted bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, which is, it's... I don't know if that term works out in Newfoundland, but in Newfoundland and Labrador, I hear that term, I know exactly the structure of that human being.
Yeah. And she'd come home from high school crying. She had another day by herself, or she was in the guidance office, or she sat in the library by herself during recess and lunch. And she'd get up the next morning and get ready and go. I really don't know if I could have made it through it if I was her, but she did.
Can I ask your mental health through this and this time? Like, how did, like, that, it, for what you're describing, it's an awfully big impact, right? The hardest thing you've ever been through. So how do you navigate that to be okay as mom to support your daughter?
Well, I was pulled off work because of medical reasons due to this too. And I felt, sometimes I could say I felt like a failure because I didn't know what to do. I went to the school, I called parents, but nothing stopped it. And then when she started getting bullied from people she didn't even know, as a scenario, one young girl met us one day at the mall and she said, "Hello, Mrs. Clark." This was a girl now in high school who had diabetes. I peeled her apple from kindergarten to grade 4 because she couldn't eat junk food, but she was one bullying her. And she went to her the next day and said, "Mrs. Clark is your mom?" And Kelsey said, "Yes." She said, "I am so sorry." She said, "I bet you know the apple story." And Kelsey said, "Yes, I do." And she apologized to Kelsey, just following the lead. You know, it's terrible.
Dr. Hubbard, this must sound familiar
It is, and I think it's so important. And thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, Paula. I'm hearing a trauma response in both of you. Again, it's not, and again, in terms of sharing the story, because no, this is not what happens to everyone who experiences bullying at different stages of their lives, but this is an example of trauma that affects not just the person who's being bullied, but the family, and talking about how bullying can shape your interpretation of all future relationships, all future interactions. It causes you to mistrust your own thoughts and opinions. And meanwhile, you're like, no, Guston, listen, soft-hearted can be turned around in terms of empathetic and kind and considerate and supportive and all of those things that make a wonderful human being and good friend being turned against you and having you self-doubt them and having you question them. And we can still see to this day the impact that's having on both of you.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to Gail, who's on the line. Gail, you know, we're having the conversation here. Then on a Kids Help Phone level, on a national level, you mentioned from 99 starting up to your position now. How familiar is what you're hearing, and what are we doing for help for folks out here now, for young people?
Very, very familiar. It's, you know, I think it can't be understated too that this kind of mistreatment is happening with children when they're just forming their sense of self and their sense of identity. So those messages repetitively, certainly, they impact how you form your sense of self and what you think about yourself. So, of course, this is going to get carried through. So I don't think it can be understated how damaging it can be. And it's not everybody, and sometimes people are able to manage it and get through it, but there are situations where this kind of trauma carries through for sure. And I think, you know, one of the stats that I always astounds me from our work is that I think it's around 75% of young people and kids that reach out to us tell us that they've not told anyone else telling us, right? So that to me is where the work can be done. That to me is maybe the part that we're missing, because I think we will always need awareness campaigns, and we will always need pink shirts, and we do need stigma to be worked on, and we need all of those things to continue happening, but also the sort of individual conversations around what's going on, how we talk about this, because shame is really powerful. And even for Kelsey's mom, and thank you so much, Kelsey, for sharing your story. It's really impactful to hear people come out the other side of it like you have, and be able to talk about it and still feel like, you know, you're still kind-hearted. I think that's really important for us to hear. But we do need to start learning how to talk about these things and how to do it even when we feel ashamed, because I think shame silences a lot of young people into not talking about it. So we do a lot of work to bridge that gap between like local supports, talking to your parents, what can we do, who's involved, to try and help get some language around that.
Gail, can you walk me through? I'm curious, and like not that lunchtime radio is the big for the child demographic and the teen demographic of the province. But I mean, we can always, who knows? But that being said, if there are folks listening, right, who want to talk to young people about the Kids Help Phone, what's the process when you call that number if you're a kid and you don't know where to turn to, and you're like, you know what, this is the only thing I've heard about. I'm calling. Yes.
You will hear a very quick recording saying, you know, thank you for calling. Press 1 for English, press 2 for French, and then you'll get a person, which I think is pretty rare these days. Yeah. Like I feel like when you call, you know, I think even young people and kids are surprised at how quickly, like you can hear the shock in their voice sometimes when you hear the person say, like, you've reached a counselor, how can I help you? Or they text in, which also is happening in, you know, I think around 400 to 500 calls a day and 400 to 500 texts a day is what we're at now. So it's a lot from across the country. And so kids and young people are reaching out for sure. And they talk to a live person under 5 minutes, usually in seconds, right? So depending on the time of day, sometimes at night, or, you know, we can have a bit more of a backlog, but it's very quick. And you're going to get a trained professional counselor or a crisis responder on our texting service to start that conversation. So you do get to connect with someone really quickly. And I think that connection is really important as a first step for sure.
All right. We'll be back in a little bit with you, Gail. Thank you for that. Because it's something I've always wondered about, right? Like what happens?
Yeah, for sure. You get a person.
Yeah, imagine that in 2024, an actual person, which obviously I can see why that would be so important for something like this, right? Having someone with empathy on the other end of the line.
Yep.
You're listening to The Signal. I'm Adam Walsh. Today's show, Bullied But Not Broken. We're talking about the lifelong impacts of bullying, how it's evolved with social media, and we're asking a general question. There's Pink Shirt Day and other anti-bullying campaigns around awareness, around prevention. Are they making a difference? What do you think about that? Text us, 709-327-8206, or email us, thesignal@cbc.ca. Here with me in studio, we've got Kelsey Clark, we've got my CBC colleague, Sarah Antle, we've got Kelsey's mom, Paula, and registered psychologist, Dr. Janine Hubbard, right? So this is everyone here for the conversation today. I want to go back to the CBC story side of it, right? So, Sarah, we started at the start of the show. I asked you how it started, and you introduced folks. I'm curious, how did both of you, like, for that connection, what was that first connection like when you got in touch with each other?
Well, I'd spoken to Kelsey a couple of times previous because we run in a similar circle. So we didn't actually know each other very well at all, enough to say hi. And then I started talking to her about this, and she said that she would be on board to help. And it was only when, like, you came into the studio to do an interview with me that I actually knew what happened to you. And that was like the first time we actually sat down and chatted about this was about 25 minutes long. And it was, to me, pretty emotional. I would assume the same for you.
Yeah, I managed to keep it together.
Yeah, you really did. Yeah, I was barely keeping it together. But.
Hey, that's okay.
Yeah.
It happens, It's when we're talking about difficult things, we all react. So then when you decided to do this, like, first of all, that's a really brave thing. Like, speaking out like that is enormous. A lot of people, and there's no shame or shade or anything on folks who don't. I don't know if I could with that, like, for my stories in my life, right? So thank you for doing it. As you came in to talk about it, what were you thinking about?
I was just hoping that maybe it would reach someone and help someone realize that they're not alone if they're being bullied currently, or if maybe they're a 29-year-old woman who went through bullying and they're still dealing with the ramifications to it to this day.
Yeah.
Because I know that when people speak out about a lot of things, like, I'm a big mental health advocate, I'm a big anti-bullying advocate. When people speak out, it inspires me. So I was just hoping maybe I could be that voice to inspire someone. I just like to try and help people as much as I can. I always say I'm an open book. I don't hide anything about myself. I don't hide my struggles. I want people to know that in this world, even if I'm that only other person that is going through this, someone else is going through it. And that you need to have hope. You need to hold on. You're not alone. And I really want people to know that.
It's one of the things that comes up a lot when I do this show from different topics. For example, yesterday I was interviewing, and this is an interview that's going to come out late summer. There's a father who lost a child to addictions, right, an adult child. And he's speaking out because he wants people to know you're not alone. But every time people tell me this, right, because we all say, hey, because that is so important. But it's massively important because you can also easily feel alone and isolated, even though in any other situation you'd be like, oh yeah, no, not alone. But in mine, it's like, I'm alone until someone speaks out like you, and you can connect on that peer-to-peer level. Am I on base on this, Dr. Hubbard? Am I wrong?
Absolutely. And we were speaking before we went on air that we've seen a real shift in the last 10 years or so in terms of, especially for adolescents, decreasing stigma about talking about things like underlying anxiety conditions or mental health conditions, in the fact that, honestly, I have to convince people they don't have a diagnosis because they're looking at ways to fit in and form a peer group. And I was kind of lamenting if you'd been equipped at that younger age to go, yeah, I have anxiety, and sometimes it makes me cry when I really don't want to, and it's really annoying. And just being able to kind of normalize and go, yeah, that's just part of how my brain works, and it drives me nuts some days, but it gives me some other strengths. That immediately takes it back into your own power. And in terms of the not having you constantly self-question, whoa, maybe there is something wrong with me. Maybe I'm, all those kind of old-fashioned labels. So we've seen some shifting, at least in terms of some of the labeling. That doesn't necessarily mean that the bullying has stopped. It has shifted and it has changed instead. But I wish you'd been empowered with that kind of knowledge and diagnosis and advocacy at that much younger age that you now have, and we hear that from you. So thank you for that.
When the, you go through, you do your interviews, Sarah goes and puts it all together, just an online piece for TV, radio and stuff. What happened after?
It was amazing. I wasn't expecting the response that I got. I had people I don't even know reach out to me, like through Facebook. I would get some messages from strangers saying, like, this is a really big thing that needs to be talked about more. I really appreciate you just sharing your story. And I had family members reach out who I don't talk to as much, but, that they were very proud of me and I did such a good job. And that then I even had someone who partook in some of the bullying reach out to me and apologize that they weren't such a good friend at the time and that they wish they could go back and make it different. And to me, no, you can't go back in time. You can't change things. But that meant more to me than I think anyone will ever know, because all I've ever wanted was for maybe someone to take some accountability and say sorry. But the response was absolutely amazing. I've had just so many people reach out and say thank you and say, like, I've had a family member go through it and they've been very shy about it. They don't want to talk. My father's friend reached out and said he deals with adults every day who go through bullying issues and stuff. And it really resonated with some of his patients and everything. It was nuts.
Yeah. That doesn't always happen, by the way. It's fantastic that it did for you and for you to be able to feel that way, because like I said, it's a brave thing, it's leadership, it's stuff we need in this community if we're going to talk about these types of issues. It's lived experience of voices like yours. And then to hear that someone who was bullying had a think and had a realization. So Mom, Paula, you're not my mom, so I can stop.
I could be anyone's mom.
Hey, there you go. To watch this for you, what's that been like?
It's the same. My Facebook, my emails have been overflooded with people that I know, or some people that I don't know have reached out and say, thank you to Kelsey. Tell her she's a strong woman, I didn't realize what you were going through. I didn't, at the time, I didn't care about me. It was all Kelsey. And the segment on the TV where I said I thought I'd come home and find her dead in her bedroom. Like, people were like, how did you live through it? I said, well, I had to because of Kelsey.
Yeah.
And it's been amazing. And like you say, if we reach one person, and I always say, parents, talk to your children. See if they are being bullied or if they're bullies. Try to explain the ramifications. Show them the video. I've had a couple of parents say they sat down with their child and watched it. And that's what needs to be done. Because you mentioned, like, the pink T-shirt and stuff. We do it all the time. I'm a retired teacher.
Yeah.
And primary, and we see it in primary. And we try to get in front of it by having friendship days, kindness week. We do it all. But it's not only in the classroom anymore.
No, we live in an online digital world where there's the world exists around us all the time, 24/7.
Yeah.
And what was the age for kids getting cell phones now? How early is it?
Well,
grade 6.
I had a grade 1 come in with their cell phone.
Grade 1.
I called their parents, said, come pick it up. So 6-7-year-old.
So we'll move to interventions in a little bit, but first I want to stick on that social media side of it just for a second. So here's let me see, what's the date? Anyways, June 24th, right, Monday. CNN story. When U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy pushed last week for a tobacco-style warning on social media, he called the mental health crisis in young people an emergency that demanded action without waiting for, in quote, right, perfect information. Right? They're saying, we know what's going on. We don't have all the studies in line yet, but we know what's happening. The same is back with tobacco. So Dr. Hubbard, what do you think about that push? This is south of the border, but to have the Surgeon General of the state saying this is like tobacco. Social media slaps some kind of picture on. We don't know which one yet, but we need this warning there. What do you think is your role as a registered psychologist?
Oh, lots of pressure there. I think I'm not sure a kind of graphic warning label necessarily has the same impact on young people.
Yep.
Again, that the scare tactics generally don't work with youth and with kids. But what does work is a combination of education, teaching responsible use, understanding there are some kids who will absolutely tell you, oh, yeah, you know, that picture was altered and was done with this, and that one, you know, I know that I used this filter and that filter to create that image. So in the same way we're seeing on some of the social media, you know, those little caveats of here's some additional information you might want to know about that story. Being able to have labels like that sort of saying, you need to know where this came from, or this image was AI generated, or, you know, this image contains so that people are making informed usage with it, I think is helpful. And we can talk more if we have time about kind of how you gradually and age appropriately introduce things like cell phone usage and social media usage.
Well, just give me a little bit on that before I go back to Gail on the phone. But yeah, just give me just a little bit on it.
Again, it's a developmental process. We do know junior high has generally been about the time where just for safety and independence and, you know, a variety of reasons, kids have often had a cell phone. But the social media companies generally ask, in theory, for age 13. And it's teaching it in a graduated way. Cell phone or social media is a privilege, not a right. So at first it's okay, we're going to look at what you've been doing daily. We're going to talk about the things that are on there. But it's also, I think it's very much akin to your teenager learning to drive.
Yeah.
They need help. They need guidance. They're going to screw up. They're going to make mistakes. And they need to know that it's okay to go, I goofed. I made a mistake here. I misinterpreted what somebody said, or I made a comment and I didn't mean for it to come off that way. So that setting up kind of like the whole, if you're in an unsafe situation, call me, no questions asked, I will come and get you.
Yeah.
It needs to be much that same built-in relationship with social media and with online things. So if you screwed up, if you sent a photo that you're afterwards going, oh, that really wasn't such a good idea, or you participated in a group text and it kind of got out of hand, having that, look, I'm not going to take away your phone, because that's the biggest reason why they don't look for help. Or even if it's, again, it's somebody's calling me names. I had nothing to do with it, but I'm still afraid that if I go to mom or dad, they're immediately going to say, well, that's it. You can't have your phone anymore. And you've just cut off all forms of social communication and enjoyment and recreation and distraction. So setting up a safe way to say either I've made a mistake or somebody has said something that makes me feel uncomfortable without fear of punishment. Is one of the earliest steps we can be doing for our kids.
Gail Brown, Kids Cell Phone Senior Director, as you're listening to that, and that question there about and it's, whether it's an image or something, but just the recognition around some of the harm that social media can have. And so south of the border, U.S. Surgeon General saying, look, we're considering a tobacco-style warning on this. What do you think about just the spirit of that?
I think I would agree. I think scare tactics are probably not the way to go. I think that's pretty see-through for young people, especially these days. I would say for me, it always comes back to communication and relationships. So this is social media is not going anywhere. We also use it for good. Kids' cell phones all over social media. Yeah. So there's ways for it to be done in a different way, and it's just about how we use it. So, but I think part of that learning also has to be with parents and caregivers and teachers. We all need to be thinking about this in a different way. Learning with our young people because they often know more about it. So we all need to sort of be in it together. And then, in all honesty, the developmental piece is really important because there's a space that could be unsafe and not okay for young people to be in. And one of the things that we hear constantly is that they're worried they're going to get in trouble. So sometimes things will escalate very quickly because of that fear, and sometimes that fear is being stoked by people online. So it exists for a reason, but because of that, things can get quite out of hand because they're worried about getting in trouble. So I would agree with the sort of non-punitive, supportive approach to learning about social media and gaining trust and using it and being able to do it in a safe way that keeps you connected and doesn't serve to isolate you further.
Kelsey, on the social media, cyber side of it, if you're not comfortable talking about it, just let me know. But when you're growing up, as you were in your teen years, early adult years, was it over, what were you experiencing when it came to the cyber side of things?
It was a lot of anonymous messages. Yeah. That was there was a website where you could send anonymous messages. I was getting anonymous messages from people just saying nasty things. And then it would be on people's regular Facebook. They would have pictures of themselves up and someone said, "Oh, you look like Kelsey Clark in this picture." Yeah. And they were like, "Who's that?" And you're like, "That girl who cries all the time?" And then they just started mocking me under this picture. And I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't tagged in it. I wasn't in the picture. There was nothing about it, but it just turned into mocking me. Yeah. And I can't lie and say I'm not addicted to social media because I totally am.
Oh, me too. It's taken everything not for me to look at my phone even now during the show.
Yeah,
so,
and it's awful. But
yeah, it's terrible.
It was something I became addicted to as a teen too because I was I wanted to see what everyone was saying about me. I was self-destructive in a certain kind of way. Because I was just so far into it and I just wanted to know why these people were saying these things. Why were they posting these things? And it just kept getting worse and worse until the point of I finally deactivated that anonymous website. I deactivated my account. I was like, I can't do that no more. And my Facebook was always sort of a safe space because no one really would message me on there. But then people started texting each other and it would go around that oh, she's crazy because did you hear she just got diagnosed with depression and they want to put her on medication. Oh, she's crazy. And it just kept building and social media just gives people this place where they think that everything they do and they say it can be deleted and it's gone. Yeah. And it's but there's always that digital footprint. But they would think oh, I can just say this here, and then once I erase it, it's gone. No one has it. And it just got to a point where I didn't want to log onto my computer anymore. I didn't want to pick up my phone anymore. And it was just awful. It was a really hard time. And social media has such a place in people's lives that you get to share pictures of your niece, and I get to see pictures of my niece when I'm not with her, and I get to see how old friends are doing, but it's still such a center for hate. Yeah. And it's just, I don't really know what else to say about it, but.
To think that, right? So, hey, picture my niece who I want to see. Oh, a lovely picture of whatever, someone in Hawaii or a cake. Then my worst fears,
yes.
Right? That kind of a roller coaster, and knowing that it's out there, or a minefield is horrible.
Yeah, because it was you'd scroll through and it'd be just nice posts of people's stuff, and then it would be
boom.
Here's some really not nice things about this person. Here's some really not nice things about this person. And it seemed like it's like I had a target on my back because it was like always stuff about myself. And I tried so hard. Like, people say, don't listen to them. They're just jealous. And that makes it even harder because it's hard not to listen to people when they're saying such nasty things. And when you're like a 13-year-old child, and you're just navigating the world for the first time, like, well, everyone is, it's like, am I this bad of a person? Am I this nasty? And it just gets really hard because, like, your brain is developing, it's growing in there, it's like leaving. Like, sometimes I still think, oh, maybe I'm not, like, maybe I am fake like people said I am. Maybe I'm not a nice person like I think I am because people said I wasn't.
Yeah. Dr. Hubbard?
Just a couple, thank you. One of the things that does happen with social media, you're quite right, is that you don't have your guard up. As awful as it sounds, but at least going into school, or for people who are experiencing things at work or on a sports team, wherever it is, you go in with that protective armor on. When you're sitting on your couch on a Saturday night and you're kind of multitasking, and suddenly you're hit with the hard news or hard information out of nowhere, that just, it hits in a different way, which also is one of the things where it does make it far more vulnerable, and the unpredictability of what am I going to see next. Just your story reminded me, one of the biggest pieces of advice we give for parents, besides the monitor, you only get independence when you've been able to start to demonstrate it, and even then I'm still going to check in from time to time. For parents, if you see your kid either avoiding alerts on the phone, and you kind of almost see like a little twitch or a reaction, or if they're on the phone or they're on the computer and you see a change in body language, those are often some key indicators that, they're receiving some stuff that maybe isn't so great. And maybe that's a way of kind of starting some of that conversation. But keep an eye out for that. It's also that balance, because we want teens to have their independence, which means in their bedroom doing their own thing. But at the same time, you want to have that conversation and be observing. How is my teen or how is my tween reacting to what's happening on their phone?
I keep saying that parents got to be accountable too. Not only social media, all aspects of their children's lives. But when you've got a 6-7-year-old who says, I'm playing whatever game that's for 18 plus, and I've talked to people who've talked to parents and say, okay, well, what does your child play on their iPad, maybe educational games? I don't know. Like, I'm not putting the blame on anybody. I'm a parent. I tried to be proactive when they were young. Parents really need to be accountable too. A lot of parents are, but some aren't. And I've seen it so many times.
And Dr. Hubbard, for interventions, right? And we're on the parent file here. Sometimes parents will get calls, hey, your child did such and such a thing. And oftentimes the response is,
Not my kid.
Not my kid.
No way.
No,
what did the other kid do to trigger that? What did they do to cause it?
So what's the advice here?
Being open to understanding. And again, these things don't start in the extreme. They start, especially in the younger kids, with misunderstandings, with miscommunication, with crossed wires, and sometimes being able to go, wow, that sounds out of character for my kid, as opposed to going, no, they didn't, going, oh, I wonder, are they okay? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Something, and so actually having that discussion, being open to the, well, what other issues are they struggling with, or are they having? Or so being open. I was commenting before, once COVID lockdowns happened, the number of parents who suddenly went, oh, I now see what the school was talking about. Because they're seeing those kind of different interactions.
That's interesting.
And I guess the last piece, and kind of as a reminder here, and also for parents, because remembering that kids who bully there's reasoning behind it. There are needs being met, and whether that's because that is the modeling of interactions that they see at home. Remembering bullying doesn't stop in childhood. We have lots of adults who experience bullying. We have lots of adult bullies.
Look around any workplace and you're going to find it somewhere.
And then we'll look at the online trolls.
Yeah.
There are needs being met. And so being open and receptive to the fact that, you know what, maybe there is something going on with my kid. And I need to explore it further. And thank you for bringing it to my attention. Can you keep an eye on it for me?
Kelsey, when, as you entered adult life, when did it feel, and I know we've talked about there's, nightmares and there's still things that happen, but has there been a point where you're like, I'm through this now, things are not that, and I'm living a life without bullying?
So, during the pandemic, I did a couple of therapy programs through Zoom.
Yeah.
And they helped me immensely. And I got a lot of stuff off my chest that I'd been holding on to a lot. And after that point, I just had all these techniques and coping mechanisms to help me along with my struggles. But the last couple of years, I would say I've been feeling a lot lighter.
Yeah.
Everything's been just on the up and up. I got married. I have a great job. I have great coworkers. I have great friends. And it got to a point where I was like, that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not right now. No matter how much I might feel like it's happening right now, it's not. There's people, like my friends care about me. They're not the same people that I dealt with years ago. And it's been going really well, but I really attribute a lot of my successes to getting to where I am today to the therapy programs I did take and the therapist I have seen, because I reached out for this help because I knew I needed it. I knew I couldn't do it alone.
Mm. What was your wedding like?
I had a Christmas wedding.
Oh, nice.
It was beautiful. We had it at the Delta.
So good. And when was it?
December 30th.
Wow.
It'd be 6 months now. On the 30th of this month, we've been married.
Congratulations.
My husband is a wonderful man. He's my biggest supporter, my number one fan. He takes great care of me. He's there when I wake up from the nightmares. He's there making sure I'm taking all my mental health medications, bringing me to my doctor's appointments, my therapy appointments. I don't know what I'd do without him.
What's his first name?
Adam.
Great name.
Right?
Great name. You really nailed it there with that one. He sounds fantastic.
He's a great guy.
I don't know what we would do without him. He's the best.
What was that wedding day like for you, Paula?
Very emotional. Fast, but very emotional. Just to see where she was to where she have come. It was wonderful. And her dad, he doesn't have any social media accounts. He curses social media. He has a email address. Her family's the only one got the address. So we'll call and he say, "Did you email me today?" I say, "No." He say, "Okay, there's no need to check it."
So he calls to ask if you emailed?
Because he doesn't remember his password.
But he won't have social media.
Yeah.
He like, when she went through it, he says it's not fit. It's not being used what it was meant for.
Yeah.
But we're so proud of her.
So then, next steps for you? Being married, working, having friends, and continuing to move forward.
Yeah, I'm hoping that life just continues on the upward path, but it's a roller coaster. It's up and down. It's not always. I have my bad days. I have my good days. But
I'm guessing some of those inner self-doubts and thoughts still pop up from time to time, especially if life is, you're a little more run down or a little more vulnerable. That little inner voice saying, "Oh, was that honest? Was that genuine, what they just said?"
Yeah, definitely. I do have trouble sometimes trusting people, I suppose. but I've gotten a little better with it because I've made some amazing friends these last few years, especially I work at work. All my coworkers are just so supportive and amazing. And one of my best friends I met through work. She's just always there if I need someone to talk to, and I have a really great support system now.
Kind of great having a best friend.
I would have to say I have a few best friends because Adam is probably up like number one, but I do have, and my mom, I would have to say she's my best friend too, so.
That's good. That's great. More than good. It's fantastic. So this is the part of the show where I'm going to circle back around. I'm going to go to Gail Brown. Gail, thank you for being on the line with us through this show. This is the part where I ask you for resources for people who are listening. And, you know, I know you're biased, but the Kids Help Phone, I'm sure, is something you're going to mention here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can check out our website, of course, kidshelpphone.ca. Everything is on there. I mean, there's our counseling service, our texting service. We also have a peer-to-peer service on our website. So there's lots of ways to, and then the website has tons of information. So there's many ways to get help and to reach out. And honestly, if I could say one thing to all of the parents and caregivers and teachers listening, it would be just to check in often and get in there and talk to the young people that are in your lives about what's going on, even if it seems like they're not interested in talking about it. Keep checking, keep talking, start with the easy stuff, but it'll get easier. And then when they need to talk about something more serious, they know that they can. So I think communication is really key here for everyone.
Gail Brown, thank you so much for spending the hour with us. Take
My
time out of your
pleasure.
schedule. All right, be
Thank
well.
you for having me.
And enjoy
You
the rest
too.
of your summer.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Gail Brown, there, Senior Director at Kids Help Phone. Sarah Antle, you know, we do reporting, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you pick stories, you report it through. One like this, and then for the outcome, how's it been feeling for you to be part of it and what you've done here?
I mean, I kind of view it as like I am just a vessel to tell Kelsey's story.
Oh yeah.
So I'm just really happy that Kelsey is doing okay with how it was reported, what was reported, and the reception that you've had, because I think that this was an issue that I wanted to kind of highlight and to talk about and to put out into the world as a reminder that this is still happening, and it's still that it doesn't stop happening when high school stops happening, right? But I think the most important thing is that it was Kelsey's story to tell, and it was her time to tell it. And that she's the one who said yes. So that's, I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah. Dr. Hubbard, we heard Kids Help Phone resources. There's a couple of others out there, right? A couple of websites. What should we talk about?
Huge fan of Kids Help, especially the texting function, because that is one of the easiest ways to start a conversation for any of us, even as adults, let alone as kids. PrevNet is a wonderful Canadian resource where they offer they do a ton of research on bullying, but they also offer lots of really good explanations and support. So it's PREV and then NET.
.ca.
Bullying Canada is another resource that's out there. And of course, remembering we've provincially, we have Bridge the Gap. We also have the Doorways programs, which is a really fast way to get in and start accessing things. And I know we're in summer break right now, but remembering that feet on the ground, our school counselors, our educational psychologists are often able to do interventions because they're able to kind of see the dynamics that are going on, whether it's observing a playground or a classroom interaction, and can often do some really effective interactions.
Dr. Janine Hubbard, thank you. Final thoughts, Kelsey, Paula?
I just wanted to speak about, I've used Bridge the Gap and Doorways myself throughout my struggles, and amazing resources, amazing help. Okay. Doorways, I've gone to visit the counselors a couple of times, and just it's such a great thing to have. I've also, even myself, have the mental health crisis line saved in my phone.
Yeah.
There were points where I was very down, very sad, and I would save it for if I had an emergency, a rainy day, if I needed that source. But yeah, Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you all for this conversation today. Thank you again for this. All right, folks, that is it for today's show. Looking ahead to tomorrow. A return more than a century later, an unknown soldier is home, lying in state. Ahead of Memorial Day, we are asking, what does the unknown soldier mean to you? That's tomorrow on the show. Till then, thanks for listening. Stay safe out there.